We'll begin shortly. 16 people, really good. Any questions? Let's see.
Rosihat.
Oh, yeah. This is week 5, is right? So today we will have Julisa, Yungsha, and Sophia presenting on the topic organization response towards change. Is the group ready? Kong, Sophia is here, and Julisa, all three are here.
Yes, we are
Right.
ready.
Let me allow you to share your screen. So again, today, like usual, we'll try to end the class by about 7:45. So Julisa, Sophia, or Kong, you have your slides with you?
Yes, we are ready.
All right. Whenever you're ready. Okay, I can see the slides. Okay, then. I believe we can start our class today. And Sophia, Kong, and Julisa will be sharing with us organization response to its change. So the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Okay, first of all, please allow me to turn off my video because previously I had a breaking up with my conversation just now.
All right, okay.
Okay. Assalamualaikum and a very good evening to Dr. Kidin and my fellow friends. Okay, this is today is our turn from group 6. My name is Sophia Adriana. I'm first presenter and then proceed with the Kong Ying Xia, second presenter, and Julisa Adira is last presenter for this topic. Okay. Moving to the next slide. Okay, this one is our table of content. We will start with the introduction, type of changes, change management model, different categories of change, and we will share certain of the case studies for change, respond towards change, managing change, the life cycle of resistance to change, and how we deal with the resistance to change. Okay, proceed with the introduction. Okay, organizational change is the process by which organization move from their present state to some desired future to increase their effectiveness. Okay, it is vital if a company wants to avoid stagnation to increase their business competitiveness. Okay, we know that this is a business necessity. Okay, employees leave and new employees are hired. Okay, and then sometimes the new teams and department are created for the company goals, and sometimes business may adopt a new technology to stay ahead. Okay, so how we manage the changes by doing your productivity towards organizational change is the way you manage it. Okay. And another one is it is vital to keep the employees in the loop and ensure that they understand why the changes is happen and how the employees will affect will be affected. Okay, with effective organizational change management, the organization can keep the business running smoothly during the transition. Okay, moving towards the type of changes. As you can see here, we have four types of changes. The first one is a strategic transformational changes. All change will affect some of aspect, meaning that not all the changes will affect all the organizational aspect. Okay, sometimes minor modification, such as policies, will influence but not completely redefine your business. Okay, and then second type of changes is people-centric organizational change. Um, it includes instituting a new parental leave policy or bringing new hires. Okay, meaning that sometimes bringing on a new team member requires onboarding and training, which may affect both the new hires and the established employees. So what you can do is you can start with the communication. You have to explain what is the reason for hiring the new people. Are they going to lighten the workload, or will they fill the skill gaps, or how will they integrate with the current team? Okay, so an example is like change to role and responsibility. As you know, job description can evolve over time. Okay, um, the changes to the employee's responsibility may require additional training, and then restructuring of teams. So of course, shifting up routines in the delicate process, it is essential to have to have a strategy for change implementation and communication. Okay. How about the policy changes? The policy changes is quite complicated. When you alter policies that directly affect employees, such as parental leave, and then vacation or remote work policies, you may extremely risk extremely their reaction. Okay, employees may could feel cheated. As always, communication is the key point here. Employees may not like the reason, but they will appreciate your honesty. Okay, moving towards structural changes, it involves major shift in the management hierarchy, team organization, and responsibilities attribute to different department, employees, and team. Okay, these changes normally overlap with people-centric changes here. Okay, example here like merger and acquisition. Merger and acquisition here are the most common cause for this kind of type, this structural change. Okay, uh, eliminating a role, redundancy, redefining the goal of the business, clearly defining the new role and responsibility, and training on the new technology are all important parts of the managed change during merger and acquisition. Okay. Okay. Other than that is creation of new team or business department. It is part of a business necessity, and you may have to create a new business direction, changes to the company organizational chart. Okay. Moving towards the last point here is remedial change. It is what we can call that it is immediate action need to be taken. Okay, example here is dealing with a loss of talent. When someone in a key position of at that company decide to leave the company, you must adapt quickly. Your team will have a question: will someone move into the role, or is the company searching for the new candidates who will take over the responsibilities immediately? How will this affect day-to-day operation? Okay. So proceed with the change management model. Okay, I believe that previous group 1 has discussed this before. And to recap, the stages of the Lewin's force field theory of change, we have 3 stages here: unfreeze, change, and freeze. Okay, as you can see here, unfreeze. Unfreeze is all about preparation for the change. Okay, the organization must get prepared for the change and also for the fact that the change is crucial and it is part of business necessity. And then change. This is the stage where the real transition or changes taken place. Okay. So for this part, the management play an important role whereby they need to communicate directly. The communication is the key point on how to succeed the changes. Okay, and then freeze. Now that the change has been accepted, so embraced and implemented by people, the company or organization begins to become stable again. Okay. Okay, some of the other model here is Cortez 8-step model, whereby they provide us with 8 stages: increase urgency, build the team, get the vision correct, communicate, get things moving, focus on short-term goals, and don't give up, and important, incorporate change. Okay. Other model here is McKinsey 7S model, whereby they provide us with 7 steps of model here, starting with the strategy, structure, the stage or attribute of this model that relate to the way in which the organization is divided or the structure is follows, system, shared values, style, staff, and scale. Okay. Other model includes nudge theory, ADKAR model, Bridges transition model, Kubler-Ross 5-stage model, and Accenture. Okay, I would like to call upon Yingsha to present for the next topic.
Okay. Good evening, pro and fellow students. I am Kong Yingsha. So in my part, I will introduce different types of change and response examples of cooperation. Next slide, please. We can classify change from macro and micro levels. The first is macro change, which includes economic, politics, technology, society, natural environment, and so on. Economic change, including per capita disposable income, labor productivity, consumption patterns, tax rates, inflation. And political change, including industrial policy, industrial supervision policy, the country's political system and military situation. And last, technological change, including level of science and technology, state system for science and technology. Next slide, please. In society and social part, including social structure, custom, religious beliefs, values, ways of life, and narrow of education. Lastly, natural environment. It means topography, climate, hydrology, biology, and soil. So we can move to the micro change. Next slide, please. So the other one is micro change, which includes market needs, competition, resource environment, and so on. And market needs, namely the customer has desire to buy the product and the ability to pay. Competition means competition scale, competitors and numbers, and specific competition including peer competition, substitute product competition, buyer competition, and supplier competition. Lastly, resource environment, including manpower, material resources, financial resources, and information. Next slide, please. So after we have successfully identified the different types of change, let's get to the case study part. First of all, I would like to take a well-known Chinese company as an example. There is a brief introduction of China Mobile Company. China Mobile is a Chinese enterprise established on April 20, 2000 in accordance with the overall deployment of the national telecom system reform. China Mobile is one of the Chinese three biggest telecom operators. By November 2019, the total number of mobile customers in China reached 946 million, including 753 million mobile 4G customers. The number of wide broadband customers is 187 million. Next, please. So China Mobile has encountered macro changes in the following three aspects in the last decade. Firstly, in terms of economic change, the continuous and rapid economic growth has played a positive role in promoting the prosperity of the communication market. Then on the technological side, the IP backbone network with broadband and packet switching mode replaced the circuit switch network as the core. The integration of informationization and industrialization drive the continuous development of new generation communication technologies. Broadband, 5G, LTE, and cloud computing technologies are increasingly mature and widely used. Lastly, in the policy dimension, means and narrow of competition in telecom industry have changed. Telecom market demand is increasingly strong. Some of the world's famous large IT companies have been gradually leading the field of the communication. Next slide, please. So in the face of these three macro changes, there are four different responses of China Mobile Company. First of all, China Mobile constantly promotes the innovation and evolution of enterprise development strategy and defines service and business leading. New Leap, sustainable development are the three periods of development strategy focus. Additionally, China Mobile positioned itself as a mobile communication expert, forging the core competence of the enterprise constantly. In the service leading aspect, China Mobile established the service concept of customer first, focus on the target customer group, and highlight the difference, make the service always in the market leading position. In terms of business leadership, China Mobile focus on business innovation, strive to provide diversified and personalized business, create high-value technologically advanced products so that the business is always in the market-leading position. Lastly, China Mobile dedicated to build an international leading innovation mechanism. The core of the international leading energy force, the world leading business and service. in the same industry to maintain the international leading speed of development, international leading operating efficiency, and international leading management level, and has a harmonious and favorable ecological environment to achieve healthy, coordinated, and sustainable development. Next slide, please. Now that we know how companies respond to macro changes, let's take a look at how Coca-Cola responds to micro changes. These are the most important micro changes Coca-Cola has faced in the last decade, mainly due to the two major factors of marketness and competition. In terms of marketness, the company has been challenged by growing consumer concerns about an active lifestyle and obesity. Also, Coca-Cola's main competitor is Pepsi, along with other carbonated drinks and juice products. The pace at which companies take market share must be studied and accelerated. Next, please. Therefore, Coca-Cola has made the following two responses to the change of the above two micro factors. The first one is about band effect. Coca-Cola has been one of the major sponsors of every World Cup since 1928, when it started to cooperate with the Olympic Games and the World Cup since 1974. Coca-Cola has been working with Formula One racing since 2004. By cooperating with three major sport events in the world, Coca-Cola has undoubtedly made great efforts in promotion, which can keep the brand effect in the minds of customers and achieve the effect of becoming a household brand. The second one is about marketing channel strategy. In the face of the huge external competition pressure, Coca-Cola has adopted a very sound marketing channel, including the ubiquitous vending machine setup, the fast food sale network led by McDonald's, and the standardization of production. In recent years, Coca-Cola has been using its brand advantage to develop new products, creating another trend, such as Coca-Cola Zero and Cherry Blossom Cola launched in recent years, as well as beverage package and slogans specially designed for different countries and regions. So that's my part, and I'm going to give it to my partner. Audio?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello.
Yes, we hear you loud and clear.
Yes, thank you Insha. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan salam sejahtera to doctor and friends. We proceed our presentation to the next subtopic, which is respond to change. Okay, people respond to change in different way, which is some are very positive and energized. They excited to learn new skill or experiencing a different environment. Others may be frustrated since they don't know what will happen to them after the change is implemented. Another group of people will have mixed emotions since they are faced with the uncertainty, which is either the change will give positive or negative impact to them. Okay, next. Managing change. We will look for the 5 kind of activity that change agent must carry out when planning and implementing change. The first activity is motivating change, which involve creating a readiness for change among organization members and overcoming their resistance for the change. The second one, activity The second activity concern creating a vision that build an organization core ideology. It describe an envision future that include a bold and valued outcome and a vividly described desired future state. The third task for the change agent is developing political support for the change. Change agent first must assess their own sources of power, then identify key stakeholders who support for change and devise strategies for gaining their support. The fourth activity is managing the transition of the organization from its current state to the desired future state. This requires planning a roadmap for the change activity as well as planning how to gain commitment for the changes. It also may involve creating special change management structure and a set of learning process that accelerates the transition. The last one, the fifth change task is sustaining momentum for the change so that they are carried to completion. This include providing resources for the change program, creating a support system for change agent, developing new competencies or skill, reinforcing the new behavior required to reinforcing the new behavior required to implement the change and staying the course. Okay, next. Next, we go to the life cycle of resistance to change. Organization programs such as downsizing, reengineering, and QKM involve innovation and change that will probably encounter some degree of resistance. This resistance will be in individuals and groups in such form as controversy, hostility, and conflict. The response to change tends to move through a life cycle which consists of 5 phases. Okay, phase 1 is change introduced. At the phase, only a few people will see the need for change and take reform seriously. They may be openly criticize change and take they may be openly criticized. The resistance look massive, and at this point, the change program may die or continue to grow. The second phase is forces identified. The change is discussed and is more truly understood by more of the organization member. Okay, phase 3 is direct conflict. This phase will probably mean life or death to the change effort because the exponent of the change often underestimate the strength of their opponents. Those who see a change as good and needed often find it difficult to believe how far the opposition will go to put a stop to the change. Phase 4 is residual resistance. If the supporters of the change are in power after a decisive battle, they will see the remaining resistance as stubborn. There is still a possibility that the resistor will mobilize enough support to shift the balance of power. The last phase is phase 5, which is change established. The actual conflict is usually more subtle and may only surface in small verbal disagreement, question, reluctance, and so forth. Okay, next. Now we go to the 3 major strategy to dealing with resistance to change. Next. First one is empathy and support. This strategy can identify people who are having trouble accepting the change, the nature of their resistance, the nature of their resistance and possibly ways to overcome it, but it requires a great deal of empathy and support. It demands a willingness to suspend judgment and to see the situation from another perspective, a process called active listening. The second one is communication. Second strategy is communication. People resist to change when they are effective communication about change can reduce rumors, gossip, and anxiety, which generally associate with change. It can help members realistically prepare for change. And the last one, participation and involvement. This strategy, one of the oldest and most effective strategy for overcoming resistance is to involve organization member directly in planning and implementing change. Participation can lead both to designing high quality change and to overcoming resistance in implementing them. Members can provide the diversity of information and ideas which can contribute to making the innovation effective and appropriate to the situation. They also can identify barriers and pitfalls to implementation the change. Okay, that's all for our presentation today.
Right, thank you. Good job. Any questions? Anything that anyone needs clarification? Please feel free to ask, or if you have any thoughts regarding organization change and how people respond to change and organization respond to changes, and what we've discussed for the past 30 minutes. Anyone?
Okay, Doctor, I'm here, Rusnida.
Yes, Rosnida. Good.
Okay, if we see there are various models or management tools, some models are different from others. How do we know that a good or correct model for our organization that we can use, or how do we know which one is good for our organization?
All right, good.
Because a lot of models.
Any of the group members wish to address that? Just look at the models that you presented just now. I think it's one of the earlier slides. When you talk about Cotta's model, 7S. Change management. Okay, this one, I think. Yeah, you talk about the Cotta's 8-step model and also McKinsey's 7S. And the group, anything you want to add to that? Which is the best model? To me, I think there are lots of models out there. And apart from those that have been identified here, like for example, the Nash theory, ACTA model, we even have Lippitt's model, and then we have so many models. But the thing is that if you look at all the models, there's 3 things that run through in all of them. What is it? It's Lewin's change model, right? Any model for that matter, right, looks into the process of change with beginning with unfreezing, moving or changing, and then freezing or stabilizing the change, right? McKinsey 7S, this is Lewin's, right? This is the basic model for any. So people would have 5 steps, 7 steps, 8 steps, 12 steps, right? But when we break them down, you will see that they all go through these 3 phases. prepare people for the change itself, and then stabilizing the change. Those are the three main components of change when you break down any change model for that matter. But if you look at, except that if you look at McKinsey's model, McKinsey's look at the parts of change, right? Most model would look into the phases of change, right? But McKinsey's 7S model and also some other models may look into what needs to be changed, right? So McKinsey looks into the strategy, what we need to in terms of thinking about how we can go about changing, and then looks into the structure, what needs to change, and the systems that come along with it. The systems are, when you talk about systems, it's simple. You think about input, process, and output, and all organizations are based on systems, because when we look at organization, they are a system in itself. A system is whenever you have components that are interdependent, right? And all organizations are made up of interdependent units, right? That are differentiated and finally integrated together to produce an output. So there's always that input, process, and output. So a system is a basic component of what an organization is all about, their systems, right? And then when we took into shared values, and this goes into the people, right? So the strategy, the structure, and the systems are all related to the organization structure, how the organization is put together, and how those parts will process the inputs. So strategy, structure, and systems are the structure of the organization, meaning how they are put together. And then we go look into shared values, styles, staff, and skills, right? These deals with mainly the people, right? One, their competency, their abilities, their affect, when we talk about people, there's always the cognitive part of it, right? There's the affective part of it that deals with sentiments, that deals with feelings, that deals with attitudes. And then there's also the psychomotor, which deals with the skill part of it, right? And these are about people. And with it, and the basis of all that is probably grouped under the shared values, which is part of the organization culture. We'll be, like I said, we'll be discussing culture later on that comprise of artifacts, espoused values, and the underlying assumption, right? And that is also a very important part of organization, because each organization has its own culture, and the culture is what makes people behave the way that they behave, right? And you see different organizations will have different culture. People behave differently according to this culture, right? And then there's the style, also part of the culture. The staff, which is very much the people working in there, and the skills, the capability and competencies of those people. So McKinsey's model look into the components of the organization. Now, if you were to ask me what system or what model works best, I'd say it depends on what. You can use any model you want, right? As long as you prepare people for the change, and then make sure you stabilize the change so that people will not go back to previous behaviors, right? So these are things that, well, I will touch a bit more later. Thank you, good question, and something that we need to always take into consideration when we think about change and development. Thank you.
Doctor?
Yes, please.
Doctor, I just want to know whether can some organization mix the model. I mean, maybe they can take McKinsey model and mix with a different model, And can it create a good transition to the organization?
Oh yeah, definitely. Any organization for that matter can develop their own model depending on what they need to do. And of course, depending on what the organization is like, right? So organization culture plays a very important part. If it is a very strong culture, then you may need to look into the organization culture because that's where you start with the change, right? But new organizations where culture is not there yet, then you may want to focus into the people, right? Get them to be, number one, probably trained to do the work that they need to do. And as such, competencies and probably aptitude becomes important, right? And once you've done that, probably this is where the next phase is where you look into teams where people work together. The interrelationship between the employees. And this is where you look into team building, for example, right? So depend on the organization itself, where we will possibly look into this deeper when we discuss about the life cycle of the organization, right? Because the life cycle of the organization assumes that each organization is just like a human being. It's just like a person, where it is born and then it grows and then it reaches maturity. And at the maturity stage, if it is not properly, I suppose, managed, then the organization may die. So death or dissolution becomes a reality in most organizations also. So it depends on the need, and also on the probably on the consultants that the organization engage, because each consultant would have his or her own model, right? So again, looking into how they plan for the change, how they implement the change, and how they maintain that change. Thank you. Any other thoughts? Okay. Are we done with the presentation? Are we done with all the slides? You're clear? And the other thing that I would request is that all groups that have presented, can you just put up your slide on our WhatsApp group and share it with everybody else? So your slides are good. Let people use those slides to review and revise what we've done so far. All right. If not, can we just stop sharing? And then I'd like to also share screen. Just, this is probably my take on some of the important things that we need to take into account when we discuss about organization response and managing change in organizations, right? So change is inevitable. And I think, like the group presented, change can happen because there's change in the macro, or there's change in the micro environment of the organization. There's change in the external environment, and there's change within the organization itself. So these changes forces organization to respond, and in a way also forces them to change so that they can better adapt to the changing environment. And well, you've discussed, I think these are some of the things that you've discussed just now, also that why organizations need to change, right? So if we look at it from the structural point of view, we can look at it from the technological point of view, we can look at it from the people, employees, or people point of view, or even we can look at it from the environment in terms of the political, economic, social environment point of view. So these probably necessitate the change for organizations, right? And in terms of organization implementation of new technology, for example, well, Kong, for example, talk about the change for a telecommunication company where there are new technologies. I think telecommunication is very important because there are new technologies that keep on being introduced, right? There's 4G, 5G, and then there's seamless, you name it, right? Even if we look at just the technology in communications, ICT in itself, things are changing. Today, you may buy a HD TV, and then in about 2 years, there'll be a UHD TV, and suddenly your HD TV is already obsolete. And possibly another 2 years, you have, I don't know what goes beyond ultra high density, and I don't think I need anything else to be much more higher density. I'm already, I suppose, satisfied with looking into TVs that we have now. But yes, they're going to change, right? And soon we are going to have TVs that can actually be three-dimensional in that sense, right? Where we can actually watch TV like we watch a game at a stadium, or when we watch a concert, where we can see people in 3 dimensions. That is probably going to be the future of TV, right? So it is endless. And when we talk about education itself, we are slowly in ourselves experiencing the changes in how we conduct classes, right? And if you remember how we learned last time using blackboards, when I went to school, I also remember having to carry those small blackboards where we actually write using chalk, right? And probably my parents talk about what they call carrying slate boards or kalam batu, something where they actually write on stones. You can ask your grandfathers and grandmothers and talk to them about how they went to school and how they learned, right? So learning now is so different. And your children will probably learn very much differently, right? Can you imagine all the schools being obsolete? We don't need to go to schools anymore. So what are we going to use the schools for? So there'll be different uses. When we talk about school, we are not going to talk about anything that is physical anymore. Probably everything that's going to be virtual. And probably learning, well, right now we are watching, probably you're watching me on a 2-dimensional screen. Probably in the future, if you go to class, you'll be probably in a, what's that high, not halogen, I forgot the word, where you can actually feel and sense people in a 3-dimensional form. Yeah, I forgot the word. Start with H. What does it? Holograms, right? You'll probably be using holograms in the future, where you actually experience more of a classroom setting. You can actually see the person beside you as being a real person, but that person is not actually there because it's just a hologram that is being transmitted. Well, that is probably the future. And I don't know, maybe we don't even have to have any interaction with any teachers, right? Probably biochips will be something in the future where we already have a chip and we just put it into our head and it goes directly downloaded. So we know something, we go to Lawyat Plaza, buy DCE 5632 biochip and then just insert in your head and you already know what organization change and development is all about. Now we're talking about the DNA now. Even the vaccine is looking into recombinant nucleic acid, right, for example, where the DNA is actually changed and programmed to act in a certain way. We don't know. That's the future, right? So new technology is always one of the triggers of changes in organization, and organizations have to keep up because all technologies get obsolete true enough. right? We used to talk about the half-life of technology being probably about 5 years, just about a decade ago, right? Half-life meaning that 50% of the people using the technology have already moved on to using new technology, right? That is the half-life of technology. And that half-life is going to be reduced furthermore. You're probably going to talk about 3 years, and then 1 year, and then within months, there'll be new technologies that are already appearing. Constantly, you have to keep abreast, right, of new technology. And we'll talk about also about changes in the structure of organization. And these include, for example, mergers and acquisitions, right? In Malaysia, for example, about 20 years back, if I'm not mistaken, uh, there has been quite a lot of mergers and acquisitions in the banking sector, for example, right? We used to have a lot of banks. Previously, we have, for example, Bank Bumiputra, we have Bank of Commerce, and then these two merge, become BCB, if I'm not mistaken, Bumiputra Commerce Banking, and then later on it become CIMB to what we know right now. So these are all mergers, right? We have RHB merging with, for example, Eon Bank, if I'm not mistaken, and then also the acquisition of other banks, for example, Rashid Hussain acquiring, I forgot, but these are all those mergers and acquisitions, which are part of organization change, because in the business world, there's a belief that the bigger the organization, then you'll be able to compete much more readily in the environment. You'll become much more competitive when you are bigger, right? And as such, that's why mergers and acquisitions happen, so that organizations become bigger and organizations acquire other organizations so that they can get, for example, new technologies, they can get new products, they can enter new markets, for example. Yes, mergers and acquisitions. And also, if you remember, way back in, I think we are talking about last century, in the 80s, right? We had, for example, telecom, Jabatan or the Department of Telecoms, or Jabatan Telecom. What has that become? It has become Telecom Malaysia, right? Where a government entity that provided the telecommunication services for Malaysia was actually privatized. And as such, it changes its structure, it changes its whole setup to become much more profit-oriented rather than just service-oriented. And that also happened to the National Electricity Board, if you remember, right? Or what people call Lembaga Elektrik Negara. That was way back in the 80s, and that is now that is called now Tenaga Nasional Berhad. There's National, what's the English name for TNB? Tenaga Nasional Berhad, National Power Company, right? But these are also privatizations which are part of structural changes. And when organization goes through structural changes such as this, they have to change their goals, they have to change the way that they do business, right? We used to talk about last time when telecoms people, or maybe even the electricity people, wanted to install street lights, right? Now, 2 lorries would come, right? Where you have a group of laborers who just dug up the hole, and then another group of laborers would put in the pole, another group of laborers would climb and start installing or start fixing the wiring, right? So just a lot of people doing work, which probably what we do now just a gang of about 3 people, even a driver doing it. So multitasking has become quite common nowadays when we talk about how we do work. Of course, we also have the machinery and the technology to help us out with work that needed a lot of people to do in the past, right? So mergers and acquisitions, privatizations, right? And even natural growth of all organizations. Those are all structurally related changes for organizations, right? And of course, when we talk about the people changes, then change in leadership as much as people retiring and people leaving organizations, right? Organization turnover where people exit the organization. That is part of the changes in organization also. Change of leadership, for example, causes many things to change within the organization, right? So there'll be new policies, there are new procedures, there are new ways of doing things, and probably there's new ways of managing and leading. There's a new vision that has been put into place. This happens when there's a change in leadership. And also when people leave, then organizations will experience a loss in probably knowledge, loss in capacity when people leave. So these are people-related changes that happen in organizations. And if you look at it, then the organizations have to do something, right? There need to be some remedial type of changes that needs to be done by organization in order to address the changes in the people, in the employees of the organization, right? Again, we cannot reduce the importance of organization culture. There's so much to discuss about organization culture. That will be, I think, in about two weeks after this, right? It's interesting, very interesting, because to me, a lot of things can be done and a lot of things can be understood in an organization just by analyzing its culture, right? Why organizations do certain things, right? Just simple things, for example, why is corruption so rampant in organization, right? I put it back to the organization culture, in which probably you just look at the underlying assumptions about corruption, right? That in itself underlines why people do certain things and why things are tolerated within organizations, right? So if you are able to change the organization culture, if you are able to change what people value in an organization, then you'd be better able to address changes and managing those changes within the organization. Of course, that is my bias. I've always believed that organization culture is the program, is the software that runs the organization. And if we need to change the organization, then we may need to change that software and how that organization is being programmed to behave in the way that it does, right? So the culture, something that we need to look into when we talk about organization change, right? And then there are times of crisis. We, right now, are in a time of crisis, right? If you look at the airline business, if you look at the tourism industry, if you look at the travel industry, they are all in crisis, right? And how are they going to address the difficulties and the challenges that they have? Now, simple thing, the announcement of a vaccine, right? Immediately after the announcement, you see stock prices of airlines. You see stock prices of hotels begin to go up because they've been battered, they are so low right now that when people see the possibility that travel industry is coming back, people straight away begin to buy stocks in the travel industry, in the tourism industry, and that caused the prices to shoot up. I think people are much more optimistic with the introduction of the vaccine, and we can see that there will probably be changes as soon. Maybe the time should be interesting. The time should be interesting, right? Right now, a lot of people have lost their jobs, for example, right? This is a time of crisis indeed. And finally, growth and life cycle of the organization. And this will be discussed when we talk about organization life cycle and how the organization grows. And as it grows, it needs to change because there'll be structural changes in the organization. More people will be coming in, and as it grows and adopts new technology, probably people have to relearn. There'll be reallocation of labor, and these things happen within the organization. So this has been discussed, right, by the group just now, looking at further technological changes, structural changes, remedial changes, and people-centric changes. It's the same thing, right? So it's a matter of how we look at it. And when we talk about change, there's always that managing change, right? I think I can hear the azan. Can we just stop just for a moment? Okay, I'm back. Now, change is something that organizations, as we've discussed, experience. And this is, if you look at how we manage change, remember the three things that we go through: preparing for the change, getting the change itself done or implemented, and finally to stabilize that change. The three important phases. And you can blow this up to other, many other stages, many other phases. But in the end, it will all boil down. Look at all the change models, right? See that you can break them down, and in the end, you'll probably be able to come up with these three basic phases of any change model, right? So it depends on what you need to do and what you need to do in the organization. And primarily, I broke this down into probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 things that we need to do under all those different phases of change, right? Of course, number one, there is a need for change, right? And organizations understand that they need to change. I'll be sharing with you also probably later on. Have you heard of the expression the burning platform, where you actually have to jump off a burning platform? It's all about the story of Piper Alpha, an oil rig that caught fire in July 1988 in the North Sea near Scotland, right? So I think it was said in that sense the biggest tragedy of any oil rig for that matter so far, I think, where the rig caught fire and then about 170 people perished, I think, in the North Sea. Was as the oil rig was in the North Sea and it was burning, so there was this supervisor that had no choice but to jump into the cold northern sea. And he survived. And when he was interviewed at the hospital and he was asked how he survived, he said he jumped off the oil rig. So people asking, why did you do that? Well, it was either going into the sea, was either jump or fry, if I'm not mistaken. That's what he said, right? Because if he didn't jump off the oil rig, then he would burn. So between the two, he was weighing the chances. There was still some chance that he might survive if he jumped. And indeed, he jumped and he survived. So that was the metaphor for change, and that was being used, jumping off the burning platform, where organizations have no choice but to change, right? And of course, when you talk about change, people don't like to change, right? I teach change, but I am usually the last person to change. I'm probably known as someone who resists change. Well, simply because changes requires a lot of things to be done. You need to relearn new things. You need to get out of your comfort zone. You probably lose a lot of benefits. Of course, you need to protect your self-interest. These are things that happen whenever change happens, right? And if you are a manager of change, you have to communicate why there is a need for change. Number one, probably you need to tell people what is the change about, what needs to be changed, right? And you need to explain probably in terms of the four or five H of change. When you need to change, of course, most importantly, also not to forget why you need to change. A lot of times organizations need to change because, like I said, they have no choice. If they don't change, they would probably not be able to survive, right? So one of the reasons, of course, to change is that organizations need to continue to survive and they need to change. And that is one of the reasons why organizations change. Why, when, where, if it's applicable, how, and who needs to change. Who needs to do what? What kind of changes are expected of each person? So these things have to be explained, right? In fact, they did a research on organizations that went through changes, right? So organizations that were able to explain and share with the employees the reason they have to change and how they're going to go about the process are usually more successful than those organizations that implement change, that force people to change, right? And if you notice, for those organizations, for example, that have implemented the ISO, yeah, the Standard Operations Procedures, the International Standards Organization, ISO 9000, ISO 9001, ISO 9002, ISO 9014, I suppose. If you notice how they actually recommend that that change process or that ISO be implemented, number one, you need to tell the people what it's all about. Get them to understand why that change is necessary, right? So number one, of course, you need to communicate that change, get people to know. And of course, you're going to sell that change to get a buy-in so that people understand why they need to change, and they in turn, I suppose, primarily you want to reduce their resistance and also to increase their support for the change so that they are much more prepared to change, right? Of course, the other thing is that you need to prepare an environment for change. Get the facilities that are required to change, right? If you need to, if you, for example, when UPM needed to computerize, to go into computer where people actually, like me, the lecturers actually work on computers by themselves, then you prepare the environment for people to change. You get the facilities, you get the computers to the people, you teach them how to use the computer, and you make it exciting for them to actually do work. This is actually preparing the environment, right? Training and learning is probably one of the foremost activity or endeavor or effort that organizations usually would undertake so that people are actually prepared to change, right? And if you remember that I talked about stenographers, the phasing out of stenographers. Now, stenographers are to be retrained so that they are able to do other types of work, right? And they become, for example, personal assistants, they become assistant administrators. These are all part of preparing the environment for change, right? And then the stakeholders, of course, the stakeholders are anyone who is actually going to be affected by the change. And the stakeholders need to be involved, and you need to get them to participate in actually planning for the change. You need them to participate in actually getting the change done, right? So in a lot of literatures, involvement and participation, where you actually get stakeholders to be engaged in the change, is a very important facet of change in itself, right? Because when people are part of the change process, then they are much more likely to support the change. People who are alienated, people who are marginalized, people who are not involved, directly involved in the change process, will probably feel that change is being forced onto them. And when they feel that they are being forced to change, then probably the resistance is higher, in the sense that, hey, you are telling me to change, but I don't like the change, right? So the resistance will always be there, right? And when we talk about resistance, people resist in many ways. There are people who resist openly, and you could probably call that overt resistance, right? And overt resistance actually can be seen. And these are, for example, like demonstrations and strikes, right? These are overt, where people can actually see, right? Or they may go on a go slow, right? Where they, I think if you're familiar with National Union of Banking Employees, they would undertake work slow down, for example. They do work, but they do their work much more slowly, right? So these are actually overt. Sabotage, probably, right? They would, last time at one time, Mars planes had the cockpit wires cut, right? That is an act of sabotage because people were going against some changes that were being instituted, right? For example, there were layoffs and so on, so people didn't like it. They sabotage. And there is also a much more, probably resistance that is more covert in nature. Covert means that it is not readily seen. People are doing quietly that you don't realize. Absenteeism, people being absent from work. it's probably a covert type of resistance, right? They just don't come to work, right? Or maybe they request for transfers. They don't like to be where the change is taking place, right? Turnover, people quitting, right? They don't actually say that they don't like the change, but they actually act as a form of resistance. Either they leave, or they absent, or they are request for transfer. So whenever there's resistance, resistance can be in the form of covert, where you don't actually, where they don't actually tell you that they are against the change, right? Or they can be overt, O-V-E-R-T, right? Overt, where people can actually say that they don't like the change and show that they don't like the change. And these are overt and covert type of changes, right? So preparing for the change is very much a very important part of managing change. And this is all about unfreezing the people so that they are much more ready for the change, right? That readiness for change is a very important factor. And a lot of research has already been done looking into the readiness for change, either as a moderator or mediator. And it has shown that yes, readiness for change is an important factor that contributes towards the change process, right? Now, of course, implementing the change, you need to continue to get people to be part of the change process. And this is all part of the reducing resistance, because if we are able to reduce the resistance, get people to buy in changes, then they are more likely to accept and support the change, right? Best practices of the organization, you try to include or integrate them into the change process, right? When we implemented ISO 9000, we take into account what are the best practices. And those best practices are actually turned into the standard operating procedures. And this is actually part of change, getting best practices, because those best practices actually work, and those best practices actually are productive. And in any change process, you keep them, right? And you may change the way things are done. You may change who do those things and how they are done, but those best practices need to be integrated into the change process in itself. And finally, stabilizing the change in where you try to maintain the performance, right? In any change process, like I will show you after this, there will be a decrease in terms of performance. And you have to always take into account what needs to be done in order to reduce that decrease in performance and start to get people to increase their performance, right? And of course, you need to reward, you reinforce behaviors that are, I suppose, that are required, that are important for the change, so that people do not relapse into. So one way is to reward and acknowledge good behavior or positive change behavior, right? And of course, whenever there's a reward, there's also a possibility of also punishing, right? More autocratic leaders will say, shape up or ship out, right? Either you change and improve, or you just leave, right? But that is much more autocratic in nature, and that would also probably increase resistance if managers, if leaders choose to go along those lines, right? So shape up or ship out is probably the last avenue, right? Also, there are many ways where you can manipulate, because remember, in any organization, there is always that power relationship. But getting people to use power appropriately is always a wise choice, right? Knowing what kind of power you have and how you're going to use that power to change behaviors is always very important, because if you misuse that, then probably the change will not be successful, and you are probably going to face failures in bringing out change. like I said just now, right? There are many models about how people respond to change and what happens to people when a change is instituted, right? Most likely in the beginning, right, when the change is announced, uh, people will go through denial, right? Just for example, if you are going to, for example, of course, on the very high end, you're going to have layoffs. You say that, well, we've reached the end of we are going to close down, right? The coming year, we'll see a lot of organizations closing down, a lot of organizations that are familiar to you, right? H&M, for example, says they're going to close down, right? A lot of fashion retailers are going to close down simply because they could not withstand, or they could not uh, survive the pandemic, right? We'll be seeing a lot of announcements, but when those announcements happen, then people will go through a state of denial. This can't be true, right? Uh, Say that you're even small, or not small, even changes like, for example, not closing down. That, for example, you have to be relocated, or you're going to transfer one unit of the organization to another location, right? So these are changes that need to happen. We're going to use AI, and people are going to be, there are a lot of people who will be obsolete. This will happen in the future when we use new technology, when we introduce new technology. Some people or some positions will get obsolete. And when you announce this to those people, then they will go through a state of denial. They will say, no, this cannot be happening to me. No, I've worked here for 20 years. How can the organization simply reduce my role, right? So these are the changes that happen. Even the appointment of a new manager or appointment of a new leader will probably get this type of reaction. No, how can that guy be promoted? How can that guy be the leader? So there's always denial, and after denial there will be anger, right? A lot of people will have resentment. A lot of people will feel angry, and these are normal. So whenever anger takes place, then this will be in this Kubler-Ross model. We just look at the emotional state of people, and anger will cause a very negative emotion in terms of people, right? And after they've gone through a state of anger, then they will start to bargain. This is where negotiations begin. So that this is actually a part of where people begin to reformulate, where people begin to reconstitute the way that they do things, right? To understand, hey, wait, can I do this instead of that? Can you please help me out by having this, right? So this is usually at the bargaining stage. And bargaining will usually be followed by depression, a feeling of let down, a feeling of being frustrated, right? And all this, after a while, then people will get used until they begin to accept, yes, there's nothing we can do. We have to accept the change, and we have to move forward. We have to move on. And this is a state of acceptance. So the Kubler-Ross models just look at how people's emotional state go through a change in time when change happens. So this is time, this is emotional state, and there's all denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally acceptance, right? And in terms of productivity, you can also see that this can be used for how productivity goes up. And when people slowly begins to accept change, then they will begin to have the productivity level that they had before. So productivity will usually go up after the change process has gone through the stages, right? Of course, there's also the unlearning where people need to learn new ways of doing things. When they are at the learning point, probably the productivity will also be going down. So there are lots of models that uses this U curve when we talk about change. That will usually happen because change will usually have an impact on the productivity, on how people feel, on the state of emotion, and also I think the next one talks about how the self-esteem. Oops, sorry. Sometimes this is too sensitive, I cannot. All right, and this is looking at, this would be a what they call a classical change model response to change, right? So same thing here, you will notice denial, anger, and they've added, for example, confusion, depression, and finally at the lowest stage is crisis, right? Where people, this is where people begin to leave, there's turnover, there's sabotage, there's demonstration. This is really the stage of crisis where people have reached the limits of their, I suppose, of their tolerance on the change. But in the end, when things begin to happen, acceptance and also towards the end, they begin to have a new way of doing things. Yeah, again, you will see that U curve that happens over time. And when we talk about change, we talk about how it affects people, because an organization is simply about people. And that's why we use behavioral science. It's about people. And when we look at change, we look at how people are affected, right? So again, most of the answers to how people respond to change, what people do, and why they do those things, for example, the result of normal response or human response towards change, right? They have the feelings about change. They don't like change. Most people, like I said, don't like change because when you have to change, there's always a fear of the unknown. You don't know what is going to happen in the future, what is going to happen to you, what is going to happen to the organization, right? And if you remember at one time when the government offices, people, I think people in the public, some of you in the public service may have experienced the move from Kuala Lumpur to Putrajaya, right? For those people who have been in the government service for a long time, last time we had the government, most of the government offices at the Pusat Bandar Damansara. And then I think in the 90s, and the early part of this century, when the government offices were being moved to Putrajaya, a lot of things happened, right? How did they feel about change? And if you were not part of it, you can always talk to the seniors that actually went through the change, right? So the government had to provide allowances because people had to move houses. They had to change, for example, the schools of their children. And these things are required part of change. So of course, most people, I think, had to go through a lot, right? And commuting was also a big part of the change process, where they actually, most people have houses in Kuala Lumpur now had to commute to Putrajaya, right? And I think the government provided transportation for people who needed transport so that they can shuttle workers from Kuala Lumpur to Putrajaya so that they can, at the early initial part of the change, that at least solve part of the difficulties in the change, right? Of course, a lot of people don't like change because they have their own self-interest, right? They like where they are right now. They like the benefits that come along with being in the present position. And when those changes happen, you would probably lose relationships, you probably lose benefits. And of course, people are interested in protecting their self-interest, right? You may have to do a lot of work. You may need time to learn new ways of doing things. And these are all creating extra pressure. And of course, people think about that, right? People also seek mutual support. They seek people who have similar feelings so that they can work together as a group, either to overtly or covertly um, respond to changes, right? They seek people who have the same feelings. Hey, I don't like this. What do you feel about it? I don't like it. Okay, let's do something about this, right? So these are actually natural responses. And some people, I think most people, there are limits to change. There's only so much change that you can take. Beyond that, you cannot afford that change. And this is happening right now, right? There's MCO, and then there's CMCO, right? And I think a lot of people have reached their limits. They cannot continue with their businesses. Their businesses have suffered, right? So there's only so much that people can afford in terms of changes, right? And like I said before, readiness to change is a very important part of it. So getting prepared, having the new knowledge on what they need to do, having new skills on undertaking the change, this is all part of readiness. Having a much more positive attitude towards the change. These are all about that readiness to change. That means as long as you're prepared to change, then change will become easier. And as such, the organization need to prepare people so that they are much more ready to accept those changes. The resources, just as important, the organization have to have the resources so that change can be done, right? You need to have the support. You're going to an online system, right? Paperless. Of course, you need to have a proper online, you need to have good internet connectivity, you need to have the hardware that helps you out with it, and of course, you need to have the skills. So these are all the resources. You need to have people, the support group, that can actually solve problems and troubleshoot when problem happens, right? So the resources have to be put into place to make sure that change can happen smoothly. And finally, stabilizing, where you need to prevent people from going back to their old behaviors, right? So computerization, going online, people go back to being paper and pencil, right? So we have actually gone teaching online, and I think it is an important part of change that we have to do a lot more to make sure that we can actually stabilize the change. People have sacrificed a lot to come to this stage, although this change is necessitated by something that is much that we cannot avoid. But we have to make sure that, yes, if this is going to be the future, then we have to find ways to ensure that we are able to continue, get better resources to help us out with this, right? So that people can join. People in remote areas don't have to climb trees or go to high places or going out to places where there's strong internet connectivity, right? So we have to have the infrastructure that can actually assist us in continuing and with the change. I think that'll be it. Oops. Wait. So that's what I needed to do for today. There's a time now, so it's still early, 7:33. Any thoughts and questions? Anything that you probably have experienced yourself that you may want to share with us? Next week, we are going to talk about the consultant, right? Nasrul and Ismail is going to present. Yeah. Is that okay?
Yeah, Doctor. Yeah, and then one more. Wina. We have the three.
So
We have three
that's
members.
next week. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Saya,
You
Ismail and Wina.
Wina. Is Wina in your group?
Yes, Wina. Yeah. Yes.
All right. So that'll be next week. Consultant. That'll be quite interesting also. So if you know any consultant that you can invite, go ahead. No problem. You can invite other people who have perhaps done consultancy, and they can share what they did.
Okay. Sure.
Okay. We are done for today. Any questions regarding response to change?
Okay, Dr. Gideon, sorry. I have to maybe I need your ideas. Maybe you have to idea because reason of the organization to change. Okay, because we have to six reason why certain organization to change to have to change. Okay, so we have to look into that the culture to people, and then maybe some people, and then some organization about the senior in or one organization, and then maybe
the OTAI, you're talking about the OTAI.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Because if I think if the organization have to change, and then have to, because the maybe the I think the achievement is not quite.
Performance is not there,
Yes.
and there are new ways of doing things. Yes.
Yes. Okay. And then after we just go through the engagement, and then communicate with them, and then suddenly, and then finally still the senior for the staff senior still maintain, and then no retain for the result, and then still not maybe not make a change.
Yeah, they have not changed, and as such are becoming a problem to the organization.
Yeah, I think to organization, maybe the solution is fired from the organization. But
yes.
I need another idea or solution if before we fire to them from the organization, and then how to make sure before we fire, and then maybe that they have to another solution, or I need idea.
Yes, I think seniors, right? These are the people who have done things the way that they have done, the way things that organizations have done the work in the past, right? And of course, change is very difficult for them. Example, right? When we went into computerization, a lot of people, especially the old lecturers, were not able to do that. Well, it's not that they are totally against it. They know that it is good for the organization. They know that there's benefits of it, but simply they do not have the capacity, right? They don't have the capacity to learn the computers. They just can't figure out the computers, right? And of course, keyboard skills, right? It takes them just too long to find words on the keyboards, and then when they type something that is not right, they just don't know how to correct it. And these are difficulties that are real to them, right? And I suppose from an organization standpoint, we have to appreciate that difficulty, right? If you have heard about old dogs can't learn new tricks, it's true, right? It's difficult for people who are so used of doing things in a certain way to change and do things very differently from what they are used, right? One way to help these people out is to provide them with the support to see whether they are able. Now, one thing, right? They are still very useful because they have a lot of knowledge, right? And one way to do that is to reposition them, reorganize their work so that they have different things to do, where they can still contribute to the organization. Of course, firing them is very easy. But remember, getting rid of them could also mean getting rid of vital competencies that the organization may need, right? So one good way, either want to provide them with the support so that they can do their present job, or reposition them so that they can do something that is just as useful and can still contribute to the organization. Of course, them being, I suppose, seniors, they won't have long to live, to be at the organization. So just live with it. So at the moment, the organization just support them and provide them with the necessary resources so that they can continue to contribute. And I'm sure they would want to contribute, right? I know last time professors, right, they are lost. They cannot do, right? No matter how you teach them computer, it just doesn't make sense to them because it's totally something new. But we find ways for them to be able to continue to do their work. We provide them with the support. And of course, this is where teams, and I suppose at our department last time, well, we realize we have all people, including people. Now I suppose I'm part of them, right? But yes, but all this while, I think when we got into all these new ways of teaching, using was this? I also forgot the new having objectives, teaching by objectives and so on, and how to calculate them. This is something that I am not used to. But the good thing at our department is that we have young people who actually support, that can actually help me out so that I can continue to do things that I do best, I suppose, right? And live those processes and help people, other people to help. So now I'm done. I'm retired, so all those new people can keep on doing the new way of doing things. But towards the end of my career, I suppose I was still able to contribute by doing the things that I know what to do best. So find ways to support those people, find ways so that they can continue to contribute and be useful to the organization. I'm sure there are many things that they can do. Thank you, Nestor.
If I may add, Prof.
Yes.
Prof, if I may a little bit in aspect of government sector, we have two approach that we can implement to cope or to reorganize people that resist to change.
Yes.
Firstly, is known as is it policy?
It's actually you can take much more of a procedural rather than policy.
Yeah.
Policy would be too, I suppose, too big. So much more of an administrative procedure.
Yeah. So and secondly is about dean to work. We like Prof said before. Prof said we reallocate them to suitable most to them.
Yes.
In other position.
Provide them with the support, people who are able to actually help them out, right? And well, as a manager, you have to be able to determine or identify their capabilities, right? What they are really good at, and use those capabilities to the extent that they can best contribute to the organization. So it's a matter of being able to manage people.
At the same time, Prof, we did succession planning to replace them on the post.
Yeah, you have to continue. You have to think that, of course, now what can they do, and of course, how much more time that they have, and what needs to be done in the future. Yes, succession planning is very much part of it. Who is going to replace them and how they're going to be replaced. Thank you, Hafiz. Definitely. So administrative procedure is definitely, that's what part of managing change is all about, right? Putting procedures in place so that change can, it's also a matter of stabilizing the change, so that you reduce the disruptions just because people, well, they are, to put it, they are not really resisting. It's just that they are not best able to do it, right? So think about it much more positively, support them.
Doctor, I have one question.
Yes, please.
Do you think measuring the impact of change fall under readiness to change?
Well, if we look at the change process, right, it's cyclical in nature. And to be able to determine whether a change or what change is necessary, you have to know what happened in the past. And as such, that measurement for change, to know to which extent past changes have been successful and what else need to be done, right? Because that is actually the feedback. You need to have the data and what you need to do and prepare for the change. For example, right? You want to change having a new technology, right? You want to have a full automation. So number one, you have to have an assessment. And that assessment is actually going to feed into what you need to do. How many people needs to go for training, for example? How many people can help? What kind of resources are required, right? Those are actually data that you will need to use, and that comes from the past measurements, right? What is the capability of the organization and how much change is required? And what kind of changes are required? Those are actually fed by the data from the past. So that measuring is a continuous process, right? So you measure the goals that you have decided in the past, and that will actually feed into what you need to do for the future. And that is part, if you look at the organization change process, right? Before the anticipating need for change, there's always that feedback from data from the past. And that data from the past comes from measuring what happens in the past. So it's that cyclical, continuous nature of change requires you to do that. Good. I'm going to, as usual, take a picture for the attendance. I think I can get the attendance later on, but just for now, everybody here? Okay, good. Anything else? So next week, we'll wait for that. And if there's anything else, just feel free to communicate either to the WhatsApp or email me. Your assignment's getting along nicely? Okay then, if there's nothing else.
Doctor,
Yes.
Doctor,
Yes,
when should we submit our first assignment?
Is it on the 7th week? After the 7th week, after the break?
After the 7th week.
Yes, 7th week. After the 7th week is the break. Use that break to do your assignment, and then you can submit the first class after the break. Is that okay?
Okay, through Putra Blast or through email?
You can both email to me and also send it to Putra Blast. At least we have some activities on Putra Blast.
Doctor.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
How many pages are you expecting from us?
I don't expect pages. There's no expectation on pages. Like I said, it should be long enough to cover the topic and short enough to be interesting. Right? Don't just simply write because you want to have it, make it thick.
Doctor, one more question. Do we have to submit in Word file or PDF?
Either way, as long as I can
Okay.
read it, right?
Okay, right.
That's important part. As long as I can read it, it's fine. Either Word or PDF. And use APA, right? Because that will put you into practice and when you want to do your dissertation report. Get familiar with APA from now. Okay then. Have a good night and good week. And I'll see you all next week. Bye for now.
Thank you, Prof.
Okay, Doctor. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Salam.
Prof.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.